mother had multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
And she died of it. And it was, and it's a very progressive illness where you lose more and more functions as you go on. And if she'd had a choice, she would have probably chosen something like Dignitas in the last year.
Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. She was utterly fed up. She was formerly a nurse. So she'd worked in the NHS during the 50s and 60s. And she knew what the end result of multiple sclerosis was. And I was her carer.
How did you vote in Scotland then?
I couldn't because I wasn't an MSP, but I would, if the bill had been robust enough, I might have supported it. So I hadn't seen the bill, but I heard it wasn't robust, and that's part of the reason why it was voted down. But from a conscious issue, for myself, if the conditions are right, and in terms of the person who's considering it, such as those who go to Dignitas and they're very clear about what their intentions are.
Dignitas doesn't look like a really good place. I mean, there's another place called Exit.
Right.
But I mean, anyway, this, my friends, is Chris Law.
Hi there.
He's the SNP for Dundee West.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
How the hell did that happen?
Yeah, rather short journey, because it was only a few years ago that during the referendum I got very heavily involved. I've been involved politically before, but I had no aspirations to be certainly an MP, and I got heavily engaged probably in the last 2 years. I set up an organisation called the Spirit of Independence, and I campaigned around Scotland in the 1950s Green Goddess fire engine over 40 days, 40 nights, and helped to boost the confidence and also get out the material for people who are interested in what the independence movement was about. And I did it on behalf of a whole range of voices, not just the Yes campaign. So,
so you're from Dundee, Dundee West.
Yes.
And I just looked at some of the horror stories about sanctions and about child poverty. It's one of the most deprived places in the country, isn't it?
Dundee as a whole. I mean, I'm in Dundee West, obviously, but Dundee as a whole is a kind of, it's like Glasgow in many respects. It's a city of two halves. If you're to look at the front half of Dundee, it's under huge redevelopment at the moment. There's a £1 billion redevelopment which will create somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 jobs. It involves the establishment of the V&A, the rebuilding the train station with a hotel, and a whole civic space, which is fantastic. I came to Dundee as a teenager. When I came to Dundee, it was mid-80s. It was classic post-industrial attack under Thatcher, and I watched the subsequent decline of that, which put tens of thousands of people out of work. So Dundee went from a city that had relatively good employment to as high as 15% unemployment in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And it's took all this time to make some recovery. In my constituency, it's still over 5%. 1 in 4 kids still live in poverty. Last year, Dundee became infamously known as Sanctioned City. There seemed to be a new directive in the DWP, which was to rack up the scale of sanctions. And as a result, the food banks in Dundee got overwhelmed. That seems to have tapered off just now, or it's calmed down a little. However, the levels in Dundee of poverty are unacceptable.
Wow. I mean, do you think it was an initiative from the DWP in Dundee?
If you speak to people who are on the ground who were involved either in advocacy, such as the Scottish Unemployed Workers Network, or Dundee Against Welfare Sanctions, or just individuals, and certainly through our cases that come through, there seemed to be almost a punitive approach towards the rules around sanctions, and it got out of hand. And interestingly, just after Christmas, it seemed to have died down. It's almost like a new direction had been taken. Now, we've heard individual people complain that within the DWP, that there was targets to be set. Now, we're still looking to get evidence on that, and I've been raising the question in the House of Commons here: is there a link, and is there also a link directly to the rise in food bank use rather? And obviously, we think there is.
But I mean, even the philosophical concept of sanctions, that's disgusting, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. Welfare, I was brought up in welfare actually, because I had a single mother. I was brought to believe that welfare was a right, not a privilege. It was something that you work towards as part of a collective insurance pot. In other words, you know, when you're working, you're paying in contributions, and then for whatever reason, whether you're through illness or through loss of job, that you'd have support at the other end. Now, sanctions are extraordinary because it treats you as if it's a privilege and that you've done something wrong. And as an MP, if I turn up 5 minutes late for a debate, I don't get sanctioned.
But can you even imagine? It's like, because what it is it's a financial thing. That's what everyone depends on. You know, to live, to survive. We've got this. We have money, which is how we eat. It's how we pay our rent. The cases that I looked in, I think it's the Dundee Courier, and it had this list of all these people that were saying, I was sanctioned, now I'm begging for food from my friends and family.
I gave my maiden speech a few weeks ago, and I said a very clear thing, that you cannot scare or starve people out of poverty. And I think with this particular government under David Cameron, there's an ideology that somehow people are listless and enjoying the pleasure of being on 55 quid a week or whatever, and therefore somehow if I take away their monies, they will have to go out and get a job. And of course these jobs are hanging from trees, according to listening to some of the new Tory intake. Sadly, that's obviously not the case, and I think it's a real tragedy that we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we are facing food poverty that's getting more and more frequent. Just to give you some numbers, last week Citizens Advice Scotland were here on Tuesday, and they said in the last 4 years the increase in demand for food parcels has been 323%. So it's, you know, it's about 80% every single year growth.
But like last night, I was driving back late and I was listening to, well, I don't know what time it was, 10 o'clock. Westminster Hour was on, and the Tory MP was saying, "No, we have a mandate for austerity." He said, "People voted. People voted." He said that that people understand that about sanctions, about cuts to working tax credits. That's.
Well, I don't know who you're talking to. I don't know what planet to live on. As far as in terms of the UK, the Conservative share in Scotland has been the lowest it's ever been. I think it's 13 or 14%. Scotland certainly didn't vote for austerity. It's part of the SNP group with 56 out of 59 seats.
But people knew. They said we're gonna. They didn't actually write down a manifesto saying blah blah. It's going to be this: the working tax credits, child tax credit. But they knew, people knew, 12 billion cuts, more cuts to welfare, 35 billion across the Parliament.
One of the issues, we were very clear in Scotland, certainly with regards to this. We made it very clear that, you know, if you look at what Labour are doing, they were agreeing to the welfare cap, in effect agreeing to the cuts that were going to come. Didn't know where the cuts were going to fall down exactly. The overwhelming mandate in Scotland was against that. I think the difficulty in the in England in particular, and I can only guess from what I followed as well, is two things. One, there was a very deliberate smear and scare campaign by the media towards Labour, and the second thing was Labour didn't clearly differentiate itself, and I think that's where it fell down. So to say that people knew, it's perhaps a Hobson's choice. They didn't really have a choice. Well,
but they said it. The guy was saying our welfare cuts are some of our most popular policies.
I can't find
today.
Extraordinary.
Today is the welfare bill, isn't it? There's a reading of
right.
George Osborne's things. I've got down. How many people live in Dundee?
Well, in my about 140,000, just under 140,000. So
I've got down 50,000 families in Dundee receive working tax and child tax credits. That's a third.
Yes. Yeah, without tax credits in Dundee, many of the low-paid jobs that are available in Dundee, people weren't able to work without that support. Many people who are in several jobs, we have the issue, of course, of zero-hour contracts, which we're trying to combat as well. Just would be in a parlous state. So the idea of cutting back credits. And we've now seen the numbers. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has been very clear that the uptake and increase in the national minimum wage, let's not call it the living wage because it's not that, is not going to be sufficient for families. So we have got a crisis on our hands coming.
I mean, it seems to me that they, they see it. They see it as a vote winner. They use the media. They attack the poorest people. But in the end, it's who's reading these papers? Who's
Yeah, I don't know why they see it like that. It's certainly not universal in Northern Ireland and Wales and Scotland. They didn't vote for the Tories. They've got the lowest percentage.
I mean, at the same time as they're doing this, he's giving people on inheritance tax up to £1 million. At the same time, he's cutting corporation tax.
Which I find astonishing, really, astonishing. In an age of...
What's astonishing is how do people swallow it?
Yeah. Well, I'm not entirely sure people are swallowing it. I mean,
but do we live in a bubble where we talk to people but outside of it, in the main population?
I mean, in Dundee, when I was campaigning there last year and this year, it was very evident that people were feeling the pressure of austerity, and that also people were sick of it, and they voted for change. So from our point of view, certainly, it's not acceptable. It's not been... the Conservatives have never been so unpopular in Scotland, and people are very aware, and a lot of that's come out of the referendum campaign. People saw a choice and made the change.
Back here with Chris Law. Well, we've just done a whole section there on austerity, on in particular sanctions and this welfare bill that's coming in today. But like across like the wider thing of this ideological austerity, it's like the rich, their wealth has doubled. This isn't austerity. Like if you go, what's it like walking in through those doors into where the establishment are and seeing like the food, the bars, what's it like in there?
When I first came down, which is 10 weeks ago now, I came down really with an open mind. I mean, I'd certainly had my preconceptions, but I thought I'll come in with an open mind. Over the course of the last 10 weeks, I was hoping my impressions would improve, because my first impressions were that this is totally detached from everyday life. It's the language, the archaic traditions, the certain behaviours we have towards each other. My background's anthropology, so I look at human social behaviour. And I brought up in Parliament, that for many people this is a Parliament that's detached, it's outside of society. I'm pleased to say that in the MP intake from Scotland we have a real reflection of backgrounds, different backgrounds, which is more representative. But if you look at the Tory front bench, or you take a look even at some of the Labour on the front bench, they're not representative of what most people are experiencing or have experienced. And then if you go to the House of Lords, which to me is a complete farcical institution, I'm not against the second chamber, but to have it unelected is ridiculous. And to look at how the vested interests are protected, how it's not accountable to the public, and yeah, it is the second chamber for assessing legislation and amending legislation.
But my question is austerity is just for sanctions, it's just for people on working tax credits, just people on child tax credits. They just give themselves 10%.
Yes. Well, MPs would argue, and I'm not one of them, that it was an independent body. The SNP as a group, we've all decided to do something with our pay rise. I already support a number of charities, so it's easy for me to continue and to increase that. And I think you'll find you speak to a number of MPs, not just in SNP, but also in other parties, they want to do something positive.
So we got bankers' bonuses, bankers' bailouts. We've got 385 billion quantitative easing. We've got tax evasion, Swiss bank tax evasion deals being signed, giving anonymity and immunity from prosecution. We've got 100 billion being spent on Trident. People said if we can afford to spend 100 billion on Trident and not afford the independent living fund for severely disabled people, this isn't a country worth defending.
I completely agree on that. Historically, up until the late 70s, there was an agreement called roughly the social contract. Didn't matter which party you're in, you basically believed in full employment, protection of the most vulnerable, free NHS, fully publicly funded, and so on. And that erosion, it's been an ideological erosion since the early 80s. And the reason I'm here primarily is I personally can't take it anymore. When I speak to my constituents, they can't take it anymore either. And what we've tried to do in Scotland is mitigate some of those effects. In terms of Trident, ironically, I was campaigning a vehicle last year that was built to supposedly protect us in the event of a nuclear strike, which is a bit funny really at top speed of 45 miles an hour. But I went over to Faz Lane and spoke to people at the peace camp last year. And I mean, it's an abomination, £100 billion on weapons we're never likely to ever use or ever need on our shores, which in themselves are dangerous and creates you know, a higher level of terrorism here than otherwise necessary. And if you're spending money on things like Trident that we can no longer afford in the context of permanent austerity, which we're effectively in, I think we've lost complete track and we've lost our engagement with the general public. And when I speak to people every day, and when I get people email me every day, these are regular things that come up. At which point, Chris, do we live in what you could call a good society? A society where you measure, yes, aspiration is important and opportunity is important and growth is important, but at the same time we would protect the most vulnerable in society. It has to be a balance between the two. And it's clear to me, certainly, that that balance is off kilter.
I mean, there's a lot of, like, I talk about it a lot, there's a massive conspiracy going on within the government to create austerity, and what's happening underneath is a shift in public, so it's a shrinking of the state, yes. So it's a shrinking of public services and moving it towards private.
Yeah, and that's been going on for a long time, and the challenge is it's in increments. Now, this takes me back to my studies years ago. The way to introduce things into changing culture is through increments. So what they're doing is quite cunning, in fact, because what happens is the next generation comes up, they're not necessarily aware of what came before, at least 10, 20 years before. So they get accustomed to a new position. And if we keep shifting society into this weightless state, whereby people feel this weight of responsibility on their own shoulders all of a sudden, rather than feeling they're part of a collective and feeding into a collective, then it's hard to stop unless people come up against it and keep challenging it all the time to slow it down. Because at the moment, I'm just astonished. The Labour Party seem to be all over the place about it. They're rudderless.
What do you think of Jeremy Corbyn?
I think he's refreshing. I'm really excited that there's actually debate. When I look at the other three leaders, they all seem to be similar shades of blue, in my opinion. I think Jeremy Corbyn is going to be a breath of fresh air, and from what I see in the polls at the moment, he seems to be taking the lead. What
do you want for Scotland?
Well, ultimately, my goal for Scotland is for Scotland to become an independent, socially democratic state that believes in the principles of protecting the weak and the vulnerable in society, gets rid of nuclear weapons, and builds a fairer society for all.
I said to people, have you got any questions for Chris? And loads of people started talking about a programme last night, 60 Minutes, about cover-ups within Westminster and the establishment, Home Office around here. What's your thoughts on that?
I didn't see the programme last night, the 60 Minutes, but I'm aware of it. And there's been programmes before that as well have come up. I really hope this comes to light, and soon. I mean, the idea of the establishment being involved, it's not the idea now, there's significant evidence in child sexual abuse, just horrifies me to the core. And it does nothing for our society or this establishment in terms of supposed to represent democracy, however intangible or tangible that might be. So a full investigation is going to be necessary.
Well, they're doing a child sexual abuse inquiry. I did speak to some people, one guy from Scotland, Ian McFadden, last year. But a lot of so you're in Westminster, you say, you walk in, it's like a bubble in there, but you're like the MPs, the outer echelons of the what's that programme used to be, Yesminster. You know, that it's actually the civil servants. It's actually the Home Office, the MI5, the MI6.
Yeah. Personally, I've not had too many dealings yet with the outer ring, you could call it. At the moment, for me personally, I'm just trying to battle this current government every step of the way. The civil service is supposed to be impartial, and of course we learned last year during the referendum that senior voices could speak out and take an opinion which was against the basic rules of the civil service. I think what you're doing, I think what many others are doing as well, and what our role should be, is to keep exposing those layers, because in a way it kind of reminds me of Wizard of Oz. Behind the curtain there's not that many big people, you know, and for a government to be successful, not a government, sorry, for a parliament to be successful, it needs to be open and transparent, and people feel engaged.
Well, Cameron's doing a thing today about Syria, isn't it? So we've had let's bomb Iraq, let's bomb Assad, let's bomb ISIS. So he wanted to bomb Assad, now they want to bomb. So what's your thought on our geopolitical?
It's extraordinary because, you know, 2 years ago this parliament voted against intervention in Syria, and then last week we find out, of course, there's been British pilots involved in bombing raids, which contravenes actually the very things they were voted for in Parliament. I don't think there's anybody would agree they want to see the continuation and growth of ISIS. There's no doubts about that. But that's for certain. However, how you deal with it, we need to see what the outcomes are likely to be from any military intervention, and we also need to have it very transparent and a full debate. And my concern as a new MP that doesn't happen, and I'm sure people watching this will have the same concern. British foreign policy is tarnished at best. So if
it's done nothing but exasperate a lot of stuff.
I mean, I marched against the Iraq War. I can remember the complete sham of debate and then the reasons for going into the Iraq War, which has caused numerous problems since for the UK.
Back here with Chris Law. We've already covered, like, God knows. Right, another question people keep asking me: what's your stance on fracking?
Very simply, they can frack off. This year I've been asked that a number of times, particularly before there was the moratorium brought in Scotland. Scotland already produces significant amounts of energy, not just in oil-based or carbon-based, but also renewable. It's not something we need, and from an environmental point of view, it's not been proven, and certainly there's been plenty of stories of it causing damage to the environment. So I'm pretty clear about it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's about controlling the means of production. So whether you're talking about Iraq and the oil, BP's now extracting oil for free from Iraq, or it's, you know, this is about the war machine. This is about them controlling. You know, why are we not investing in wind power? Why are we not making wind turbines and exporting them? Why are we buying in Scotland £8 billion or something on wind turbines?
I don't know if you know, but Dundee City's got the only industrial turbines in the UK.
Okay.
Michelin, which makes tyres, obviously, they have two that they use on their site. Scotland led the way, and it's continuing to push the way forward with renewables. It was wholly disappointing to find out a few weeks ago in Parliament that we were going to see the support from the government for onshore wind power, the increase in tariffs to support the industry getting pulled, which means that we're going to see a direct loss of jobs, and also a falling back in terms of demand, because companies are not going to continue to invest. In my own city, a few years ago, we were hoping to have wind turbines established in Dundee to be built for offshore, but because there was no firm agreement about what the tariffs are going to be, there was no company who was prepared to put down their gauntlet and say, right, we'll invest for the next 10 years, when they weren't sure what investment they're going to get from the UK government. So it's been a bit topsy-turvy, and I think the priorities are wrong. In the long term, if we don't invest in renewables, it's going to cost even more further down the line. We should continue all the time, all the way forward.
They're so sneaky, the Tories, as well. You just, I mean, what about this fox hunting thing?
That's very interesting.
Because they've got you, haven't they? They're kind of like, they're trying to push through this evil English vote thing.
On the fox hunting issue, it was just something I went and explored myself after we decided as a group to vote against it. It was the right thing to do. I know that our principle had always been never to vote on an English-only matter. However, there's certain things in the world you're going to vote on, and there was a number of reasons why we voted or decided we would vote on fox hunting. Primarily, two key things. One was in my own constituency, I had around about 250 emails. I equally had the same amount from the rest of the UK. It became a story that and something that people felt very strongly about over a period of months. It wasn't sudden. The other thing was we came down here to be a progressive voice in the UK, and this was our first opportunity to say, okay, we'll step up to the mark. I know that our issues are normally national related to Scotland, but in this case this is a wider thing. We're interested in animal welfare worldwide, so why would they not be interested in the rest of the UK? What's interesting that I've learned since then is about an organisation called Vote OK. I don't know if you heard of them, Mark.
No.
So Vote OK targeted marginal seats for Conservatives and put in resources and people to campaign for pro-hunting
Really?
candidates. Yeah, and it's very worth looking up on. It's in the press and different articles, and I was astonished because 5 years ago they claimed they managed to get 39 seats on behalf of the Tories. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But this year they had 139 seats targeted. Now, how this came to my attention was the night after we had made a decision as a group, I had one or two new Tory MPs who came up to me and said, thank goodness that he's made a decision. And I said, why is that? And they said, because in my constituency, I would have found a terrible dilemma because I was supported by Vote OK, yet I didn't necessarily support fox hunting. So that happened on more than one occasion on the Tuesday. So I started to look at myself to go, well, what is this Vote OK? So it's really interesting that a very particular pro-hunting, fox hunting lobby was helping to support getting pro-hunting candidates into seats. Now, how many seats were successful in, I don't know, but it's very clear the numbers. And when I started doing a little bit of research on Wednesday, I was just
what is that about? What in their psyche?
I've got absolutely no idea.
Seriously, what's that? What is that?
I can't see how anybody can get a pleasure from watching dogs ripping a fox apart.
Even Cameron, where's their priorities at?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
What is that?
I've got no idea. I mean, it's for me, it's quite alien. We've had a ban in Scotland for a number of years, and as a result of our own decision making last week, we've decided to look at it to make it more robust.
It doesn't make sense why it's so important to them.
Yeah, I've got no idea. And it makes me beg the question, is it lobbying that makes it that important? Has it been external pressures that have borne down on the government? And if that is the case, then the question is how far the lobbyists have an influence on government.
Whether the lobbyists are in government, do you know what I mean? The lobbyists, you've got unelected ministers, you know that, don't you?
Yes,
you've got Lord Hill, you've got Lord Nash. Lord Nash is a schools minister, unelected. He's the one who started the bloody academies.
Yes, that's
you know,
right.
You've got unbelievable people. That Lord Green, the Mexican drug cartel money launderer, he was made a lord. Stephen Green from HSBC, he was then made a minister.
Yes.
That's what you call democracy. What did you think about the Queen's Nazi salute?
Oh, you know, I've got mixed feelings about it. It's 7 years old, you know. I think there's been a bit of a hoo-ha made out of nothing, really. It's 7 years old. I can remember when I was 7 years old, the kind of things I probably did, not thinking about the sensitivity.
But a lot of people raised quite questions like, well, who was filming?
Well, the question for me wasn't the Queen, it was who was around the Queen, more to the point.
Was it her dad, the King?
Could have been her dad. Certainly it must have been.
And they said that she did it really well.
Oh gosh.
Like that.
Oh gosh. It just shows you how the sympathy the royal family had at the time, perhaps with
they had a lot of connections, didn't
yes,
they?
of course. It must be a huge embarrassment for Buckingham. I can understand that.
I mean, to me, the most important person in the whole thing is Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, why was he bringing it out now? You know, at this particular time.
Rupert's on top.
Yeah, well, you know, he's always there to try and expose things that are going on. I don't know how far or how much damage that will have done to Buckingham Palace, but it certainly shows perhaps a real connection where, you know, our next king at the time may well have been a Nazi sympathizer.
To take it out of context of the 1930s and bring it more up to date, me personally, I think there's a lot of people that will be using that, framing that will be on a lot of right-wing a lot of Tories, they'll love that. Do you know what I mean? Because that's all part of their shtick, isn't it? Because they kind of like that sort of. I don't know. I mean, when you take it as a whole, British establishment. Look at the things we've been talking about: fox hunting, cover-ups, Nazi salutes. You know, at the core of it, British. It's weird, isn't it? It's like there's something.
I mean, the only plus side to this is we can actually talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's states that you can't talk about it in, so at least we can. And I think the more we can do to bring to light, to bring to public's attention, how the state works, how the establishment can cover up parts in the state that are embarrassment or...
Do you have any hope of changing anything? Like to me, the most important thing at the moment is austerity. The most important thing is the way that the richest wealth has doubled, poorer people are being punished, working rights, like with the union, are being smashed to bits, you know, child poverty, you know, this is the most important thing. How they get away with that. How can you change any of that?
Today we'll be debating on the welfare bill. What I'm concerned about and what I've seen over the weeks I've been here is that too often we're sitting on the benches debating, you know, each and every point of a bill, and there's very little people on the government benches. There might be one or two ministers, but you might end up in a position where you don't have a single backbencher. And then 10 minutes before the vote, they all trot in and they vote to quash, well, to push through their agenda without even a single argument. That concerns me greatly. That is one of the things I find astonishing, that, you know, actually the Commons is not an effective chamber anymore. It's not one that you could say is truly accountable. So you can write down a wish list as an incoming government on your manifesto, and you can press it forward without ever having it properly debated. So today, of course, two of my colleagues will be debating on the welfare bill, putting in speeches. We'll be putting in interventions. But who will we be putting up against? There'll be very few, I would imagine. It's deeply worrying, this welfare bill, and it's deeply concerning the direction this country's going. I have great sympathies with countries such as Greece, what's been happening there in terms of the pressure put upon them by institutions outside of Greece, disrespecting the fact that 62% of the population voted against austerity, yet they're going to have to sup it up, which is astonishing. And in this country, the idea that the Conservative Party had put forward a popular mandate for austerity is just quite frankly absurd, because apart from the fact that one of the lowest ratings, like Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland voted against this. So it's imposing its will across the UK. And so therefore, as a Scottish MP and an MP representing the SNP, will continue to make it very clear to Scottish electorate, this is where you are within the UK establishment, this is what we'll fight against and will be a very strong voice against. But to continue within the UK framework, where you have 85% of the population, which is England of course, having dominated largely by the Conservative Party, means that we're all going to get dragged through some of the worst of austerity and sanctions and the cuts that we're about to experience.